As we move into week 2, I just wanted to take a moment to kind of dig into what we're going to be looking at. It's a continuation from week 1 where we're looking at the human body, the skeletal system, and looking at in the three-dimensional relationship here, where we're looking at the axis of rotation, the plane of motion, and ultimately the joint action. So really it's all about being able to identify flexion, extension, ab and abduction. These are the joint actions that are occurring, and they're occurring in specific planar type relationships. So you're taking this two-dimensional space and you're applying it to the joint somehow. So if we look here at the ankle, right, we're going to say this is the plane of motion that's occurring in, and then we're trying to find that individual axis that's going through there. This will become more second nature to you as you continue to move through, and you won't have to think about it so much. But we are going to be adding another layer to this, and we're going to be adding the muscle component, and that's what Module 2 is getting into. So when we look at the Blackboard shell, you can see the modules here, and when we look at the Module 2, we're looking at the musculoskeletal part of movement analysis. So we were just looking at the skeletal system here in Module 1 last week. Now we're looking at the muscular system to justify that musculoskeletal. So I have 3 videos here, about 11 minutes long, 8 minutes long, and this last one here is 20 minutes long. And it's a progressive aspect getting into this human movement system, looking at more of a theoretical perspective, big picture aspect, and then getting down to specific muscle contraction types. And this is where you'll get into a lot of detail of concentric, eccentric, and isometric. And just as a quick note, isometric and concentric, although they are different, physiologically they are similar. So when we look at concentric and isometric, think of those as similar. And so really the debate is between, is it a concentric action, is it something that's overcoming gravity, accelerating, or is it an eccentric contraction, it's slowing things down. So isometrics basically pause, and your concentric contraction is your accelerate. This is what's causing movement, forcing things to overcome its natural resting state or overcome gravity. And then eccentric contraction is this braking force. This is where you're going down with gravity, but you're slowing things down. You just got done releasing the baseball. You're descending the weight with gravity, and it's done in a controlled manner. So if you want to think of concentric as like your go, your explosive, that's the gas pedal. Think of the eccentric as the braking pedal, but not where it's coming to a complete stop. That would be isometric, but just slowing things down as you go through. And then I added this lecture last year because it was more of a capstone, what was bringing everything together and really hitting what most students would consider a tricky point. You know, it's tough enough where you're trying to look at the human body, you know, the skeletal aspect here, and try to determine, visualize that axis of rotation and kind of see the plane of motion that's occurring in. And you know, it's kind of easy to memorize a bunch of the joint names, but really appreciate what plane of motion it's moving through, and then to add another concept of this muscle type contraction there. So it's going to take some time, so make sure you're putting the time into it. At the end of the videos, and then I have this movement in muscles, which is more of like a pulling it all together aspect of how do you apply it to certain exercises and things that you're familiar with. Like you should already somewhat be familiar with a bench press and a squat and a lat pull down. You may not be doing those exercises on a regular basis, but these should be somewhat familiar to you. Like you could look at someone in the gym and say, oh yeah, that's a squat, you know, that's a bench press. And you inherently already know those movements, and so all it's doing is taking what you already know and applying it to the new terminology and the new perspective of what we're looking at. But at the end here, you'll see this familiar, these are the joint actions here, but you got these 2 documents here. You have this muscle contraction flow sheet and a muscle control formula. We're going to do an activity in class or online together. We go through this contraction worksheet, and then the muscle control formula, it's referenced in your textbook. It's referenced a little bit, and then basically what I did is I copied and pasted from the textbook that it was referenced from, the larger aspect of it, so you had more opportunity for practice. What these documents look like, this is the first one. This is the muscle contraction flow sheet, and I explained this in one of the videos, but this is here for you to kind of go through. I think the second page here are the questions that we're asking. So this really just kind of teases out the difference between isometric, concentric, and eccentric contraction, and it kind of provides the stop sign. Isometric means there's no movement at all, so this is what's happening when you're at the stop sign. Coming up to the stop sign, you start to put the brakes on, but you're not slamming on the brakes and you're coming to a complete halt. You're going from, let's say, 45 miles per hour to 40 to 35, and then you're progressively getting there. That entire braking aspect until you get to the point of stopping, isometric, was eccentric. And then you let the person go across, and then you go, and then you don't slam on the accelerator. Some of you might, but you gently go on your accelerator on the gas pedal, and you go from 0 to 5 to 10 to 15, 25, and so forth. And so that's concentric. That would be the equivalent of concentric contraction. So think of concentric as the gas pedal, eccentric as the braking force, the brake pedal, and then the isometric where you come to a complete stop. Your car's in park or you throw it in neutral. Now, to help to identify this, you're going to ask some questions when you're seeing movement. So when you see an activity, the first thing you're going to see is that active movement. Is the person themselves producing that movement, or is some other person doing that for them? Is it a machine? Is it just gravity? Is it manual therapy? Someone's doing some stretching. But if it's active movement, or there's no movement happening, it could be an isometric contraction or nothing at all. But if it's moving against gravity, meaning that it's overcoming, gravity is always down, and the resistance of gravity is always down, so we might redirect it with pulleys, but 90% of the things you're analyzing, gravity is down, so you're looking at the downward aspect of gravity, and you ask this question, is it moving against gravity? Then the result of this is an automatic yes, concentric contraction. If it's not moving with gravity, means it's going in the direction of gravity, so it's going down, and you have to ask, is it moving slower than gravity or faster than gravity? If it's moving slower than gravity, because you're putting the braking force on, that's an eccentric contraction. And then in the very rare instance that you're moving faster than gravity, like you're trying to duck, or you're trying to slam a medicine ball into the ground, or you're trying to throw something into the ground, yes, the movement of that object is definitely moving in the same direction gravity is pulling you, but it's going faster than what gravity would if you just dropped it, right? The speed of which it would fall versus how fast it's going down. Then there's an accelerative force there, and it's going faster than gravity. So this happens infrequently, this explosive type movement. Usually, if there's no movement, it's an isometric contraction. If there's movement that's overcoming gravity, that's the concentric phase, that's the concentric contraction of the muscles. And then if it's going in the same direction of gravity, but it's moving slower than what gravity would be pulling on it by itself, so like you drop it, like you take that 35-pound dumbbell and just drop it, and see how fast it comes crashing to the floor, but you're taking that 35-pound dumbbell and you're lowering it slower, there's some muscle contraction that's happening to put the brakes on. So that's the kind of the muscle control form, the muscle control flow sheet that we have to kind of help navigate through the process, just kind of seed you through those questions. Eventually these will just be happening automatically. The next document that we have is this muscle control formula, and it's basically that abbreviated flow chart just expanded out into a lot more detail. So you can see the 6 steps that are here. You're basically identifying what motion's occurring, the type of force, is it external, internal, and then the type of muscle contraction. And I think I have 6 or 7 examples here. So the bicep curl is pretty straightforward. When going from position A to position B, the load's down here. The load went up, so this was overcoming gravity. The joint action that we're seeing happening here is elbow flexion. The external force is gravity. The plane of motion is the sagittal plane about that medial, lateral, or the frontal axis. And then the agonists that are actually producing the movement are the elbow flexors, and the antagonists are the elbow extensors. Notice how I didn't mention any muscles at all. The only muscle that was really mentioned is in the name of the exercise, but we're not in this class identifying specific muscles. It's about looking at muscle groups and looking at the type of contraction they're looking at. It's more from the overall, taking a step back, the movement analysis, not this individual muscle analysis. So this forms the basis of that the homework assignment that's going to be due. It's really an active study tool, the movement assessment, and you're doing basically this. You're looking at a picture of an exercise, and then it's asking you some questions based on some of these steps here. What joint motion's happening, what plane of motion it's occurring in, who's the agonist, who's working concentrically, and so forth. So that's kind of the basis for Module 2. It's building on Module 1, so you have to make sure you have Module 1 stuff digested pretty well before you start moving here. If you don't have that stuff in Module 1, definitely go back and watch those videos. These videos sometimes help to reinforce those things, and so sometimes jumping into these. But you have quite a bit of content to get through, so make sure that you're staying on top of it. And we'll be looking at wrapping up some of the biomechanical principles in the following week, and then getting ready to take our first exam. So good luck, and we'll see you this week.